I had friends who I thought were just as talented as your Katy Perrys or your Lady Gagas, but unable to cut through because they didn't have the resource or knowledge. And because I had this skill set of using data to help businesses make better marketing decisions, that's when I started to develop the idea around, what Unheard could be.
The idea of actually standing in front of the dragons must have been absolutely terrifying.
When you watch it back, you kind of look calm. So obviously you're internalizing all of this chaos. Before I knew it, I was stood there in front of the dragons, pitching. And once you've kind of got over the first 5 minutes, it's actually great. What I'm always trying to do is create opportunity, and so if the first opportunity fails, have we got 2 or 3 underneath that are going to kind of support us and keep us going? And it's all about putting the power back in the artist's hands. We want to give artists back time to focus on what they enjoy doing, which typically is creating musical content. I don't feel like I've worked since I started Unheard. I've kind of just been loving every single day. It's definitely hard, it's definitely stressful, but you feel so alive.
Welcome to Tileyard The Secret Source, the podcast that brings you behind the scenes at Europe's largest creative community. I'm your host, Nick Keynes, and each episode we'll be chatting with the game changers, disruptors, and innovators who are shaping the future of the music industry right here at Tileyard. Get ready for some incredible stories and inspirational characters. Let's go.
Alex, here we are. It's only been 2 hours since we last spoke to each other in Vinyl Cafe, like we do most days. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We've had so many brilliant conversations over the years. How many years have you been here now?
I think coming up to 3. Definitely 2, but coming up to 3, it's gone so quickly.
So it feels like yesterday, although I suppose when you think about what you've achieved in that time, it's also a lifetime. What I wanted to do is go right back to the beginning, in terms of the beginning of your journey. You're building currently, and we'll talk a lot more about Unheard over the course of the next half hour or so. You're building a really, really exciting business, effectively in the music industry.
Thank you.
Back to when you were a kid, have you always been into music? Is that something that's always been a part of your life?
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah, for sure. I think I've always had a keen interest in the creative spaces. I think that came from sitting in the car with my dad and my mum listening to Level 42, Meatloaf, like old school music, which completely immerses you. Like, I think when you're young and the music's like blasting through the speakers in a car, you get completely hooked. And what I wanted to do is kind of explore that. So I then made a drum kit for myself. So I made it using my mum's fitness stepper. That was the bass drum, and I would slam my foot on it. Yeah, I would get pots and pans, and I would kind of then create a little drum kit for myself. And that was kind of my first. I was young, 6, 7, 8. That was my first, I guess, keen passion and interest. I then went on to have other passions and interests. I played lots of sport and really enjoyed the sciences. But I think that was the first time I felt kind of. It's hard to describe, but you kind of feel something. And that has obviously come back to fruition, 10 years later.
It's interesting, those bands you mentioned and artists, that's kind of my era. Makes me feel old, mate.
I went to see Level 42 last year with my dad. Still amazing. I've forgotten his name, but the bass... Mark King.
So I was a bassist, and I could never play like Mark King. I played about 1/10 as many notes as he did. But it was interesting. I grew up in the 80s, and it was a fantastic era because... I suppose we'd had the 60s, 70s, and music, pop didn't even exist until the end of the 50s. And the 80s was, some great bands, but some really simple songwriting, but really, really great songs. I think it was a great, maybe the 90s was a pretty interesting era too. But so, you look like a drummer, you look like a musician. So did you ever sort of take up, did you play seriously, or was it just literally on the homemade drum kit?
On the homemade drum kit, that's how it started. And then when I got to probably 16, 17, I managed to persuade my dad to get me a drum kit, which was permanently placed in the garage as far away from the house as possible. And then an electric drum kit as well, so very fortunate for in the house. But never played really seriously, I just kind of play as a hobby. Definitely improved and got to a place where I probably could have played in a band. But I always enjoyed it as kind of a pass, something to do on the side rather than pursuing it as a full-time career. I guess because I didn't have a background in music. I didn't study music. My parents weren't in a band or anything like that. Perhaps I didn't have the confidence to put myself out there to say, actually, maybe I can do this. The closest I got, I guess, to being a professional artist or musician would be DJing.
Right.
So I DJed quite a lot. Whilst I was drumming, I was DJing as well. And then we got to a point, me and my friend who were doing it together, we got to a point where we used to DJ out quite a lot. And we would play in Birmingham. We built a bit of a name for ourselves in Birmingham and played alongside like Hot Since 82 and these sorts of people. Camel Fat is another one who we used to play alongside. So we made some good progress in that space. But I think when you're DJing and earning little bits of money, but you also need a full-time job, it gets to a point where you've got to choose one or the other. And I think for me and the guy I was doing it with, we chose to kind of work full-time.
Possibly. I mean, again, we'll come back to this. Maybe that the empathy of being a playing musician, you know, DJ musician. It's most of the artists today are DJs and have a DJ background. It's, you know, electronica now is obviously such a major part of the mainstream music industry.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting when we come on to Unheard to find out how much of that kind of resonates with what you're now doing to help artists. But back to, so you mentioned science. So was science something that you were particularly good at, you were interested in? Again, is that another important sort of part of the journey that you are now on?
Yeah, I think my mum was good at it and she wanted me to be good at it as a result of that. My mum was a physics teacher and I played a lot of sport when I was younger. I played lots of football and that was what I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to be in the sports field. But as you're kind of going through your studies and you've got to pick your GCSEs, you've got to pick your A-levels, ultimately, you know, I went down the path of biology, physics and chemistry and a bit of maths as well, because I felt like, you know, there were some good career opportunities if I was to go down that route. You know, you could maybe be a doctor or a dentist or these sorts of things, which again, I think perhaps came from my parents slightly. Yeah. I've never been that academic. Which shows in the results that I got. And then I studied that at university. So I studied physiology at university. Again, probably not really knowing what I wanted to do, but knowing that a career in medicine would be, you know, a good career. But quite quickly when I was at university, I realised that the people I'm on this course with are a lot smarter than me. They really enjoy the subject. And I was there at uni. I guess the thing I got from university most was how to communicate and socialize and build a network of friends. And I established like some interest in music then again. You know, that's when I started DJing and playing out a little bit. So I think university was great for me in that sense. You know, I could dive into the local music scene in Liverpool, which is where I was studying, made a great group of friends. But in terms of kind of diving into the sciences, I think I learned that actually it wasn't for me. The people that were doing it were incredibly smart and very committed to that cause.
It's a lot of what you're saying resonates very personally with me, actually. You know, in terms of, you know, trying to work out where you want to go with your life and how certain interesting moments in time can sort of take you on a slightly different course. But
I try and use that as a message actually, because you know, I've never been the smartest. In fact, probably like bottom 20% throughout school and university. But you know, you can have success and overcome that by working hard. You know, and I think that when I see people who are struggling with their like GCSE results or whatever it is, like, you know, I want to be an example to those people that have struggled academically, that you can, you know, have by no means made it, but, you know, you can make good progress to having a good career, you know, if you work hard.
It's we will talk again about the ingredients to success. I mean, it always reminds me of a story. One of my first clients here, Christian Henson, an amazing composer, an amazing businessman, just a great inspirational character, a genius. I've always called him a genius. He always said I was never going to be the best composer, so I just was going to make sure I was going to be the hardest working composer in the world. And he probably is one of the best composers in the world as well. But with that work ethic as well, that just has given him, he's built an incredible career for himself. And I think I don't think I've met anyone that's been successful that hasn't worked hard.
Yeah. There's no cheat code to it. You know, and I think I'm sure we'll talk about this, but that entrepreneurial journey, which I think is glorified, like massively, you know, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur and build a business. Like, you know, if I had my choice again, would I do it? I don't know, like it's pretty hard, you know, and I would actively encourage people to think about, rather than what's like cool and popular, because it isn't that cool when you're up at 11 o'clock at night dealing with like a legal document, think about like what's actually best for you. And actually that might be a 9 to 5 somewhere because you have great work-life balance then. You know, you have very little work-life balance if you're trying to grow your own business and you want to do it properly. So it isn't for everyone. And again, I try and like push that message back to people that want to start a business who have had a great idea, to say, you know, okay, how deep is your motivation for this? And I was talking recently about the motivations behind wanting to do this. And I think what really helps is if the motivation is personal. I think if it's like a really deep personal motivation about something you want to change, or someone's mind that you want to change, then I think that also helps to keep that work ethic aggressive. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, there's so many questions in my mind that I want to ask you. And it's interesting. A lot of, again, at Tileyard, we talk about people are on a mission. There's a passion typically that underlies the journey that people are on in terms of the businesses they're building, or the songs they're writing, or the pieces of content they're creating, and the tools they're making for those that use them. I mean, interesting with you. So uni, not self-confessed, not the most academic. I bet you're a lot brighter than you say you are, because I certainly think you are. So in terms of coming out of uni, did you think at that point I definitely want to have my own business, or did you have some time before you set up on your own? What was the next phase of your journey?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think reflecting back, I always had, I don't want to say it, but like an entrepreneurial spirit. I think I always, I remember when I loved football boots, and I built this really rubbishy website, basically an Excel document of all the football boots ordered by price, and what I would sell those boots at, what price I would sell them at, and then how much margin I would make. And I just did this like for fun in my bedroom. And I had lots of ideas throughout my life, and I always maybe had a thought that I could go on and do this, and I wanted to go on and do this. My mum said something to me once, where she said, "You'll never make £1 million working for someone else," and that kind of stuck with me a little bit, and has informed kind of what I've gone on to do. But one thing I wanted to do after I'd left university is, I had one skill which I was quite poor at that I know would be really valuable, and that was presenting. When I was doing physiology, you would do your thesis and then you'd have to present it back to the class. And I was always really bad at presenting. I got very nervous. I still get nervous now, but kind of learn mechanisms to cope with that. But I knew that if I was going to succeed, I need to be able to communicate properly to individuals, but also to groups of people. So what I did was I looked for a job in sales. And I found a small company based in Knutsford in Manchester who sold asset management solutions, like pretty boring, great guy, like great team to work for, very small company. And basically I got given a car, a laptop and a notepad, and it was like, go and sell our product. And I got free reign. So I was driving all over the country, going into businesses, selling this like asset management solution. And that allowed me to develop the skill, which was like quite poor when I left university, to a point where it was reasonable, and I could then go and sell whatever I was trying to sell. Then I became drawn to the tech space, the tech industry. I thought that's where it was all happening. So that led me down the route to kind of join the tech space a little bit.
So into tech, you're a great communicator. We'll talk about something that I'm going to have to ask you in a short while that I think confirms that. But in terms of so tech, next steps, learning that. Again, it's constantly trying to learn and improve. And I think Nelson Mandela once said a great thing. He was 92 and said, someone was asking him, what's the key to longevity in life? He said, as long as I keep learning something every day, then life is enriching still. And that was a 92-year-old man that had been through and made such an impact on the world as Nelson Mandela. So I think what a true statement. So tech, thinking, you're learning how to communicate and sell. What was the next step for you?
So I wanted to join the tech world. I wanted to develop a skill that was valuable within the tech space. So I found an automotive tech company called CarWow, which has now gone on to be quite a successful automotive tech company. Joined there quite early on in just kind of sales and account management. So dealing with dealerships, dealing with consumers who wanted to buy cars. And then I actually started to develop an interest which has been key to the journey going forward, which is data. And I was very fortunate when I joined CarWow to have the opportunity to go and work in the trading team as a trading analyst for a guy called Alex Brees, who joined from Google, like very smart, like probably the best boss, one of the best bosses I've had. Learned so much from him. And whilst kind of, garnering an interest in data, I read a few books about data, one being Dataclysm, which is a book that was written by the founder of OkCupid. And he basically writes about all the data that they collected and they're not assumptions, kind of the real, final assumptions that you might make from the data that you collect about people's behavior.
Yeah.
And so actually they've got so much data that they can say, if you're this type of human, you're probably going to be attracted to this type of human. And that fascinated me, and how you can use data to reduce uncertainty with decision making. And so I got to practice that, at CarWow, working for a great guy, and developed a real interest in using data to support businesses at that stage.
I guess the correlations that the more data you have, the more patterns and correlations you can then discover. And was it at that point were you starting to think at that stage of things you might want to do for yourself? To, you're never going to make $1 million working for someone else. Was that already that seed had been sown, and were you already starting to develop some thinking?
It had, because I moved down from Manchester to London, and when I moved to London, I started to build a bit of a network of like just artists who were my friends, who I'd go and watch gig, and what I saw was that they were super talented. They were able to get a gig or two, but they had no resource around them and no knowledge about how to start to promote their music. And so this was when it became personal for me, because I had friends who I thought were just as talented as your Katy Perrys or your Lady Gagas, but unable to cut through because they didn't have the resource or knowledge. And because I had this skill set of using data to help businesses make better marketing decisions, that's when I started to develop the idea around, what Unheard could be. And so I started to help these artists a little bit. I would help book them live shows. I would help create a social media strategy for them. And this was doing it alongside working full-time at Carwow. So it certainly started to come together when I developed a skill set that I thought was valuable and I was interested in, and started to develop a passion that was personal, with these artists that I knew. I thought, actually, maybe there's something here. And that was a very early, probably in 2018, 2017, 2018, very early stages of what Unheard could become.
So you're still working. You've got this incubation stage, I suppose. When did you sort of first think, I think there's something in this. This could be a business?
Well, I suppose from early on, actually, I thought maybe there's something in this. But what I didn't have was music industry experience. So I knew that I wanted to go and get that first, just to understand the space, understand actually how deep people's knowledge is in kind of the analytics, data and marketing space in music specifically. So I applied to Universal Music to work there as an analyst. Unfortunately, I got the job. And so that was, I knew going into Universal Music, I think, that I wanted Unheard to be my long-term business, and that's what I wanted the future to be. So I knew that my time there would be limited, and I knew that I had a reason for going there, and that was to learn as quickly as I could and understand where my gaps in knowledge lay, so then I could take that into the business.
Thanks to our main sponsor, TYX Studios. Based here in the heart of Tileyard, if you're looking for an amazing place to record your podcast, Jack and the team have everything that you need. They built some top-notch podcast, music, photography and content studios that are perfect for bringing your ideas to life. Plus, they offer memberships so you can get the most out of their beautiful co-working spaces too. Check them out at tyxstudios.com to see what they're all about. Big shout out to Jack and everyone at the TYX Studios for supporting us on our journey.
And how long were you there?
9 months.
And so you're obviously a very fast learner. Did you get out of it what you thought you would? Was it almost a sort of a that sort of proof of concept? I'm now ready. There's something here. I'm gonna go for it.
I think so. I think a couple of things about my experience at Universal. One is I'm forever grateful for the opportunity there. Working with the biggest artists in the world, helping them, build successful marketing campaigns is amazing. And when I joined there, I thought, actually, this could be my dream job, to be fair. But what I also struggled with was the transition from startup to corporate. I think, you have so much responsibility and accountability, even as a junior in a startup environment. And then when I switched to Universal, it wasn't like that. And that's just how it's set up, and, that's how it is. And I struggled with that a lot. I think knowing that I wanted to achieve something and knowing that I wanted to drive something forward and drive change, that environment wasn't conducive to that. For me as a junior at that stage, I'm sure it is as you kind of rise through the ranks. But I'm forever grateful for that experience. I couldn't be where I am today without being able to reference that time. It lends credibility to what we're doing at Unheard, for sure.
So it's an important. I think it is having that understanding that it's part of a journey, and it's quite interestingly, with that sort of the major sort of the corporate world or the major label world, this idea that maybe you haven't got that ultimate control over the outcome. My background was music, as you know, and we were signed to a major, and it was amazing, but there's a lot of things that were very frustrating because you didn't have that control. And I suppose what Tileyard has allowed is businesses to sort of build their own businesses around like-minded people, but be in some control of their destiny. So very much a sort of a community for independence. So you left Universal. This is it. You're now in business. running your own business, running your own company. What would you say was the sort of the hardest hurdle to get started when you first sort of made that step?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing was, to be honest, by the time we were making that step, we were generating enough money to support myself full time. So, I'd kind of built the business to a point as an agency, so there was no tech involved, as an agency just servicing artists with promotional campaigns and running ads for them, to a place where I could leave and I would be okay for kind of 3 or 4 months. But what I knew I needed to do in that 3 or 4 months is raise a bit of money, because I wanted to build a tech product. I'd prove there was an appetite for artists wanting data-led marketing services. And what I needed to do now is create a scalable product, so not just 10 artists could use what we were doing, but millions could. So that was the challenge. The time-sensitive challenge was then raising a bit of capital, because we probably had 3 or 4 months to do that. And that process was, again, like going back to the sales skills. I'm so glad I kind of developed those, because it's just the sales process. It's finding relevant people who might be interested in your project, reaching out to them on LinkedIn or filling in the type forms on Google, sending them emails, these investors or potential investors, and trying to find the right ones, and try and make it a good fit. And I think being able to work hard and trying to sell your product, and if it's personal and you're passionate about it, then I think you'll always end at the right place in that process. And so we managed to raise a bit of money within that time, and then we were away. We were away to build our product.
It was interesting. You've got an amazing skill set, right? So you're eloquent. I mean, presenting. We'll talk about presentation skills in a sec. I mean, when I first met you, I was very drawn by you and the passion you had and the authenticity. I think that's another word that I tend to use a lot, actually. Is, do I believe this person that's sort of pitching this idea or this business, or it could be a song, whatever it may be. And I think authenticity is crucial. I mean, in terms of raising money, so I think when we first met, you were just about to go and present on Dragon's Den. We got to talk about it, right? Because of course I was really excited for you, and of course it took a few months before it was aired. But your performance on that was I mean, particularly now hearing that you're not comfortable presenting, the idea of actually standing in front of the Dragons must have been absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, and I even, like, to this day, not even to this day, we've not been doing it that long, but, I was presenting in the US last week, and I get so nervous before I go on. But it's weird, when you watch it back, you kind of look calm. So, like, obviously you're internalizing all of this chaos. But for Dragon's Den, without a doubt, I was bricking it. Yeah, I was bricking it. And to be honest, we never wanted to go on Dragon's Den because we were trying to raise some money at the time. We were struggling to raise a little bit of capital. So I was doing everything I possibly could to kind of keep the business going. And one of them was, my partner was like, you should just apply for Dragon's Den. And I was like, no, I don't want to apply for Dragon's Den. We've raised more than they typically invest anyway. And eventually I did it. And before I knew it, I was stood there in front of the Dragons, pitching. And once you've kind of got over the first 5 minutes, it's actually great, but it's that first 5 minutes is like getting your words out in a way which is digestible for those 4 people. I think it's 4 of them. The Dragons sat on the other side. Then it's actually really enjoyable. It was kind of 2 hours. We were there for a couple of hours, like answering the questions, and eventually, we got offers for money, which was great, which we didn't take in the end. We didn't take the money. It didn't quite work because our round that we were trying to do started to come together. So, in terms of it being a useful tool to build momentum, it was certainly useful for us in that sense. Yeah,
it's interesting. A word that does get used a lot by a lot of people I talk to is timing. You can have a great idea and all the money in the world, but if you haven't quite timed it right, if you're too early or too late, and then things change, you have to keep that agility. I mean, is that something that has timing been sort of friends to you and also to your detriment in the journey so far with Unheard?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think about timing too much because what I'm always trying to do is create opportunity. And so if the first opportunity fails, have we got 2 or 3 underneath that are going to kind of support us and keep us going? But timing definitely plays a part. And I think if we finish this journey and we look back, we will start to understand what the macroeconomic climate meant for us and how that helped us. Like I said, one thing I do think about a lot is making sure we've always got a number of opportunities. So if our tier 1 opportunity fails, the tier 2 one's there, the tier 3, tier 4, tier 5. And that's been really useful for us. It's challenging to build that up, and it means you're constantly working to build new opportunities and create new opportunities. But they can end up being really valuable. I mean, one of them is, a great story is that we were asked to go to the XP Music Conference in Riyadh. This was about 3 years ago now. Wasn't sure about going, it cost a little bit of money, which, as a small business, we have to be conscious of that. New conference, so again, didn't really have a history, wasn't sure who was going to be there. Went, ended up getting food poisoning, so I was quite ill. But one day I went to the desert. There was like a trip to the desert, went to the desert and was just sat there kind of enjoying a drink. And Hazel Savage came and sat next to me, who I didn't know at the time. And we had a good conversation, we struck it off. That was the end of it, got her email address, and then bumped into her at Tileyard about 2 weeks later. Showed her what we were doing. I said, look, we had a quick chat. Nice to meet you again. This is what we're doing. And then a week later, she invested, and then she introduced us to one of our biggest investors, a guy called Willard Aldritz, who has been a great support through our journey. So I think creating those opportunities and like taking them and saying yes is so valuable, and that's certainly been a core part to our journey.
Well, thanks for the soft plug. I appreciate it. But I hope sums up what this play. The intention actually when we set Tileyard up was all about trying to maximise those opportunities for those collisions that could lead to a really meaningful conversation and beyond that. I think part of bringing the right certain types of people together that are all effectively in the same kind of industry. Music's at the core here obviously, but we go beyond just music, but it's all creative, and creative people naturally tend to be pretty inquisitive, and so that's a great example of how that timing, but you can sort of maximise the opportunities to have those collisions, I suppose, particularly if you're in a creative environment.
Definitely, and look, without plugging Tileyard too much, we've got loads of those stories that we could tell about bumping into people in Vinyl Cafe, bumping into an artist, bumping into Richard from Autonomy, whoever it is, and then we end up building a great relationship with them. We support them, they support us. So we have so many of those stories that we could tell. It's been really valuable for us.
Well, thanks, and that's why you're here. Because we really believe in you and what you're doing too, and your team. I mean, in terms of where you've got to, so Willard was obviously a really, really important moment with someone with his background, amazing sort of amount of experience and knowledge of the industry and passion as well, and a belief in you. In terms of, so you're a year or so into that journey now. What would you say the biggest challenge is now for the business? Because is it constantly changing, or are you finding that it's the same challenge that was sort of number one 2 years ago? Is the same challenge today, or is it a different phase now of the development and gestation of the business?
Yeah, I'd say it's a different phase. We've gone from having 20,000 artists using the app last year to 110,000 now, so it's grown really quickly, which means we have different problems that we need to solve. And a problem that we think about a lot, and product is probably the biggest focus area for us, alongside raising capital. But a problem we think about a lot is actually supporting artists so they're ready to promote their music now. Previously we were thinking about how to build the best promotional tools, which is really important. We want artists to be able to amplify their music. But what we've learned over the last year or so is actually there needs to be a mind shift kind of change, which needs to go back to helping artists prepare to promote their music so their promotional campaigns are more effective. And when I say prepare, I talk about things like your Spotify bio. Has your track been mixed and mastered? Have you got a YouTube About section? Have you got high-res images on those platforms? And the reason we think about this a lot is because what we found is a lot of artists, probably 65-70% of artists on our platform, are trying to promote their music when they're not ready to. And that's objectively not ready to, it's not like we don't like the sound of their track. And so in terms of our focus, it's very much shifted from, just trying to build some interesting stuff that we think will work to listening to our community, understanding what the data suggests that these artists actually want and need, and then servicing them within the product around those tools. So that mind shift has definitely occurred, and has been really rewarding, to be able to speak to our community and build for them as opposed to just building stuff that we think they might want. I think, I'm not sure for everyone, but the fundraising journey, is a journey that is constant, to be fair. And we're always interested in speaking with the right investors. We've had offers for money which isn't always the right money, which we'll always decline. But always on the lookout for great investors who want to join this journey. I think we'll raise a little bit more money, but after that, we've got a pretty good path to profitability and to build a really big business.
Born in King's Cross and brewed right here in Tileyard, Two Tribes is one of the fastest growing and most exciting independent beer brands, founded with the creative community front of mind whilst brewing great beer. You'll not only find them in supermarkets and some of your favourite local pubs and restaurants, but in art galleries, festivals and music venues too. Award-winning beer Two Tribes focuses on more than what's in the can or the glass. It's an opportunity to create memorable moments in memorable places with memorable people. So sit back, relax and enjoy the podcast. Check them out by visiting www.twotribes.co.uk and see what they're up to on Instagram at Two Tribes Brew. Please always drink responsibly.
It's fantastic. I was going to ask you a little bit more about Unheard for those that don't know about it, and you've just answered the question before I even asked it. But it's an app, so is it available to any artist anywhere in the world?
Yeah. One of our vision at Unheard is to create a world where all artists can achieve success on their own terms. And that means we've created a product which is a platform that's available on web. It's available on, like you said, we've got an iOS app, which is a native iOS app. And essentially what we're doing is any artist can log in, and we ingest as much information as possible about that artist from all the streaming and social media platforms. So where your audience are listening to your music, what are their interests on social media channels, what playlists are they interested in. All the information we can gather from you that's available via the public APIs, which are kind of the public-facing areas of each of the streaming social platforms. Once we've gathered that information, we then make sense of it for you. So I didn't just want to create a data aggregation tool which showed you visualizations over time, because as an artist, you don't know what to do with that information. So we create actionable insights for you, stuff that you can actually use. And this could be things like your TikTok followers under index versus your other platforms, therefore launch an ad on TikTok. And we'll actually build your audience for you within the product. So in a few clicks, you can launch a really well-targeted ad on TikTok, for example. We also have the opportunity to pitch to playlists, build your own website, which you can use to build your Discord community or your WhatsApp community, and loads of other kind of cool features. And it's all about putting the power back in the artist's hands, both in terms of making good marketing decisions, also in terms of accessibility and affordability, but also in terms of time. We want to give artists back time to focus on what they enjoy doing, which typically is creating musical content. So those are the things that kind of summarizes the product, and those are the things that we're trying to push back to artists.
That's brilliant. Really, I mean, God, I wish something like that existed 20 years ago when I was trying to make it. I mean, it's interesting just hearing you just describe the business that you've so brilliantly sort of created. I mean, the passion is still there. Would you say, I mean, going back to that, the idea of when you're, in your teens, sort of thinking, I'm quite entrepreneur, I like the idea of my own business. Have you enjoyed the journey so far? I mean, I know it's not always easy, right? But it's on the whole, would you say it's something that you've found fulfilling and enjoyable?
Yeah, honestly, I feel so lucky. I think the gratitude piece is the important piece to carry through, because I don't feel like I've worked since I started Unheard. I've kind of just been loving every single day. It's definitely hard. It's definitely stressful, but you feel so alive. It's like you genuinely feel like each day you've got to try and achieve something, or to your point earlier with your Nelson Mandela quote, you've got to learn something, and you've got to keep evolving. And that truly does make you feel alive and make you feel like you're contributing to the society, really. So yeah, I feel very lucky. There's definitely not much work-life balance. So, I think my partner's great, and very supportive. But it's brilliant, and I hope we can continue for as long as possible. Yeah.
But in terms of where you're at now, obviously there's still a way to go, right? So the journey is an ongoing one. Yeah. What are you looking forward to most in the next sort of 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I think the big thing for us is expanding into new markets. We've shown great organic growth in markets like the US, in France, in Germany, in Canada, in Australia. But we haven't been able to go out there and understand actually what those communities of artists want to see from a product, and what the nuances are between, promotional campaigns in the UK versus others. So international expansion and going and understanding those markets is something I'm really looking forward to. And also, watching the product develop. We've got to a point now where the product team, I mean, most people in the company are smarter than I am, which is great. And we can really trust the product team to deliver something awesome without me needing to touch it. So I'm really excited to see what those guys can go and create. And I trust that they can create something amazing. So I'm excited for that.
Fantastic. And you're a young man still, so do you see this as being one of many businesses that you want to run in the future, or are you very much focused on Unheard for now and worry about what comes next in the future?
I think what motivates me is people. And it just so happens that I had friends that were artists, I had experience in the music space, and I wanted to help them. And that is what allows me to be passionate now, I think, because we're supporting people. And I'd love to, in the future, continue to support people in other ways. So I'm very much focused on Unheard right now, and I will be for the next 2 to 3 years. But if we ever got to a point where we were able to, make a bit of money from it, then I would, without a doubt, invest that back into different communities, and people, and support them on their entrepreneurial journeys in the same way that the likes of Willard and Hazel have with me, because I think it's exciting.
That's a nice segue into communities. I mean, obviously, Tileyard is it's a bit of an old school kind of approach, isn't it, in the world we now live in, where it's very much it's a physical place with people that are effectively interacting on a daily basis, building their businesses. Yeah. How important is it in an increasingly digital world that there is still a human interaction?
Yeah. I'm a massive advocate of this, and if I was to do another business, I would have everyone in Monday to Friday, in the office, because information travels by osmosis, like naturally, and you definitely see the value in that, and you see that actually people just hear things, people talking about things, and then they go and work on something, and they're like, I heard you talking about this. Like, what do you think to this sort of solution? So I think it's so valuable, even away from just, being able to nip down to Vinyl Cafe, say hello to people, have that kind of physical interaction, put a smile on people's face, they put a smile on your face. It's so valuable, especially coming off the back of COVID, where a lot of people were isolated for a long time. It gives me energy, like being around people. I think it's important.
I mean, you built the business or started the business on the back of COVID, right? So how much of a challenge was that for you?
For us, I think it was a benefit, because it meant that alongside, I was working full time, but I didn't really need to go into the office, which I shouldn't say this, but it gave me like a bit more time to focus on Unheard. And because we were playing in the digital space, the digital space was incredibly buoyant around COVID. And so for us, we could leverage that to go and say, look how valuable the digital space is right now. We're building a tool which supports artists in the digital space. Therefore, I think you should invest in us. So for us, it was really helpful. But obviously for the live sector and for other sectors, it's dramatically impactful. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of the industry we're in now, obviously the music business, it's always changing. Just spoke with Cliff Fleur, who I know you know well, talking about how much it's changed in the last sort of 20 plus years, and it's going to continue to do so. Where do you think the industry is at? Do you think is it in a place where Unheard is more relevant than ever? And do you think the business and the industry is in a good place? And does the future look bright, do you think?
I think so. I want to be positive about it, because I think that you see a lot of headlines which aren't necessarily positive about the music industry, whether that's layoffs, whether that's AI, whether that's fraudulent streams, whatever it might be. So I want to be really positive about it, because I think that there are so many, more so than ever now, talented creatives with an opportunity to cut through the noise. That doesn't mean it's easy to cut through the noise, but it means there's an opportunity for you to do so. And I think that, I was just at the Music Tectonics conference in Santa Monica. Prior to that, as an ADE in Amsterdam, and the amount of smart kind of people who want to start new businesses in the space, or have started, or just going on that journey, which impact the music industry in a positive way, was huge. I'd never met so many kind of talented people who were trying to impact the industry. So I think that if the support network can get itself together to support the next wave of kind of entrepreneurs or leaders in the space, then I think the future looks really bright. Yeah. Well,
it's a brilliant way to end what's been a great chat. I knew it would be. It always is when I see you. So, Alex, thanks so much for that, and best of luck. I really, we're all massive fans, and can't wait to see you grow Unheard into an even bigger, more successful business.
Thank you, and thank you for your support. You personally, but also Tileyard. You guys have supported us massively, and it's fair to say we probably wouldn't be where we are today without you. So, thanks.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Tileyard The Secret Source with me, your host, Nick Keynes. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you go to tileyard.co.uk to find out more about our amazing community, and looking forward to sharing more stories and insights from the heart of Tileyard.